I just want to start by reintroducing Tom Brisley, the producer, introducing Chris Martin, the director, and of course, no introduction needed, the photographer, Paul Conroy. I'm actually just going to take a step back, again, just looking at the beginning of the makings of this film. There is, of course, your book that you wrote. But I wanted to turn to Tom first, just to take us back a little bit to the beginning of how you came to this story and how the development and its creation came about.
I'll try and do the short version, but films take a long time to make. First of all, the idea came from Chris. Chris and I have worked together quite a few times over the years, and Chris had found out about the story and found out that there was a book being written, and we managed to arrange a lunch with Paul, Chris, myself, and the publisher of Paul's book, and there was a bit of bonding over Liverpool Football Club, and I think, and also, I suppose that's underselling Chris's amazing storytelling skills. Paul asked Chris to talk through the vision of the film. We talked through it, and at the end of it, Paul said he was gonna make the film with Chris, and that was the first part, which in a sense was the most important part. And then we thought, well, how on earth are we going to raise the money now to make the film, which is always the million-dollar question. We then went to Vice, and Vice really helped us in the early days with the development, and they allowed us to go into filming, to do the interview with Paul, and that then gave us a tape, a sizzle tape, which was quite a long sizzle tape in fact, and a master interview with Paul. We then used that to go to the broadcasters. We went to History Films, which is part of A&E Indie Films in America, and they really thought there was something important in the story that we had to tell. BBC Storyville, the same thing, they came on board at a very early stage. And then we had quite a sizable chunk missing still from the budget. And there was this amazing thing called the BFI Film Fund, and we thought we'd apply for it. And we somehow got through the first round and got shortlisted. And then, as I said right at the beginning, there was a process here where you had to come and pitch. And we came to pitch 2 years ago, and then were successful, and then the whole budget was then complete, and we were able to go and then make a film. That's roughly it.
Thank you, Tom. I'm obviously going to be talking about the film, but again, the next stage I wanted to just discuss is you have talked in the film about the importance of your relationship with all those you work with, but of course particularly with Marie. But of course, just taking a step back, the importance of the relationship between Chris and you in terms of working together to create the film. I wondered if you could talk a bit about the importance of your relationship with Paul to get that right for the best film.
Gosh. Sorry, tricky question. Look, I don't. To be honest, the honest answer is that we never really talked that much about it. To be honest, that was number. I mean, honestly, sometimes I think you just meet someone, you get on with them, and that's it. It's like, I think there was a trust, a two-way sort of trust. Any of you here who know Paul won't be surprised to say that communication between us over the long period of making the film was at times sporadic. I would sometimes send a text to Paul, and 6 weeks later, I'd get a reply, and that was absolutely fine. It was, you could say, "Oh, did you get an answer?" Do you know what? That's fine. I'll get back to me. And that's really the way it went, And from the other side of it, I'd say Paul just never even. We never once sort of hassled and asked him and said, "How's it going?" We just went to its own pace, didn't we? Really? So easy going. Sorry, it's not very good.
That's a perfect answer. I would like to turn now to your relationship with Marie, Paul. Watching this is the third time I've seen the film. It's absolutely compelling. And all the time, the words character and fate, always just come at me all the time in terms of how much your characters, both of your characters, were your fate. Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our fates were almost sealed from when we met. I built a boat. It was before the Gulf War in 2003. We were in northern Syria, and I was stuck. Couldn't get into Iraq. So after about 2 months, I was like, I'm going to build a boat. So I got loads of lorry inner tubes, built this mad boat, a raft, and tried to get across at night. And we got captured, and all this Syrian army got us. And then after a couple of days, I got back to the hotel, and all the other press wouldn't talk to me. They're like, you've spoilt it for everyone. So I was like, you know, a leper, no one. And then Marie come in. I'm sitting on my own in the bar, Billy, no mates. It's the door just plays open. She goes, who and where is the boatman? And I was like, I'm here. And she walked across. She goes, boatman, I like your style. It was like a friend. It was just like a friend, any friend. But that was it. You know, that's when we met. And over the years, you know, I mean, she was still calling me boatman till the end. And it was just, you know, we both knew. It was one of them said, when we worked, I don't think I ever had to say, don't forget this, do that. She never had to say, take this photograph, do that. It was just a beautiful partnership that just worked. And, you know, the Sunday Times were equally as, you know, they were like, they couldn't believe it. It was like, you know, you're still with him? And be like, yep. You know, she's abandoned photographers, like, littered across fantasy. Guys walking around going, have you seen Marie Colvin? I'm going, oh no. If she didn't like them, she'd lose them.
Paul, above anything, you were bound and driven by a compulsion to tell the truth. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was all about. You know, it was you know, the reality of war. The actual bottom line reality is, it's the women, the kids, the helpless people on the ground, and you know, most often the people with the least voice. You know, there are great journalists who cover the international, you know, the geopolitics, they cover the weaponry, all of that. You know, the bottom line really is, if you want to tell people what war's like, you've got to go into their basements where the women are there with the kids. The men are all dead or fighting. And that was, you know, that was our vision of war. You know, if you can tell that story, then you actually start to get across the real horror of war. It's all horrible, but the real horror is the people who don't have the voice. And, you know, these dictators, they like to work in the dark. They hate people coming in, as the end result of that was, coming in and shining lights into it. You know, that is the last thing they want. And, you know, it was about that. You know, show that, get that out, and that's war.
I think what was really interesting is you talked about it being a war of the internet age, and so we were seeing images all the time on the internet, but there was still a compulsion to go in and be very close and intimate, and those key scenes that occur, you know, in the structure of the film, of the tunnel, the basement, the baby, those key moments that really are so impactful, that although we live in an internet age, that's never going to allow you to show and tell the visceral nature of those stories.
Absolutely, you know, it's a tricky thing, because, you know, we're often accused of being, oh, you need to go in and know. There's two reasons. A, you don't see that. People tend to, you know, the activists, you know, they know what they'll get the tanks, they'll get the. Problem is, that shows one thing, that gets posted, it's automatically diluted by the words unverified. And also, there is no backstory. You know, these are just people with grab cameras, and they're doing their damnedest, and I support them in every way. But, you know, it takes, you know, you're taking a photo, just a photograph in a war. You know, it's not that easy, because there's a lot you've got to get in there. Trying to tell a story in one image, and Marie's trying to do it in words. And you know, like that basement, you know, to get that horror of the basement, because you need somebody who's as brilliant at emoting the situation as Marie. You know, my pictures were never going to do that on their own. It needed somebody who could take that, paint a picture in words, and, you know, she was the master of that.
Chris, in terms of the structure, it's a very strong central narrative with all your outpouring of story that is the spine of the film, along with other such strong, compelling interviews. Talk to me a bit about how you decided, in terms of the performance structure of the film, juxtaposed with the often unseen footage.
Well, fortunately, I had something called Paul's book to base it on. I mean, I think the film actually, I don't know what, I do know what you think of Paul, actually, that it pretty much, I mean, I will plug your book now, Paul.
Once in a while, Paul Conroy. I'll plug your film in a bit.
But I mean, I don't know if anyone's read the book, but when I got the book, I got the draft of the book, I sat down and I thought, well, I'll give it 2 or 3 days to read, and I finished it. I think it was 3:30 in the evening. I started at 8 o'clock, and I was just, because it is just a gripping story. And I think it was really obvious that the film just had to have that intensity and that sort of relentlessness. I mean, I feel, when I watch it, that it is, I know it's intense. It's clearly intense. It's an intense story. But the idea from the beginning was to try and encapsulate that relentless intensity, just keep it contained in that, that sense of being trapped, not just in the room, but in the city, and the whole, psychologically they were trapped. And all that came from the book, to be honest. I mean, what I actually had to say I was quite surprised at is when we sat down and did the interviews with people in the book, I mean, they did actually say the same things. Not that I would ever think, Paul, that you may have poetic license, but it was exactly as said, written in the book. So in a way, it was the narrative was set down.
Although you injected humour as well, which I think that lightness of touch as well also actually really is effective in terms of the contrast with the sheer relentlessness too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot more humour in the rest of the interviews, and we kind of pulled it back. But I mean, Paul is probably the best person to talk about it. But anyone who I live in the Middle East, and when you're surrounded by, I mean, I look out the window in Beirut and there's just bullet holes all over the buildings that haven't been rebuilt, and yet people will just, constantly joke about it. And I think on a level of actually going into the front line, if you didn't, I don't know, you're the best person to talk about it, Paul, but if you didn't have that,
you really do need to. You need the ability. At the end of every day after the stuff, you say, if you can't just crack a little quick one that'll just break the tension and lets it out. It gets from the outside sometimes. It looks a bit. It's a bit risky, but otherwise you can't go to sleep with all that in your head. And we used to laugh and joke that that hours before she died was the funniest time I can ever remember. She, I think, we've done all them Skype calls, and she's laying there in a room covered in blankets. She goes, "Paul, I think I'm going deaf." I was, "Fucking hell, you're blind in one eye. How are you going deaf?" So I said, "Let me look in your ear." So I looked in her ear and I had a matchstick and I was probing about with my phone. And I said, "Stay still, stay still." And I went in and I pulled this thing out and she's going, "What is it? What is it?" And it was the little rubber bud off the earphones. And we couldn't stop. And I had these blankets on and we're both laying there. And moments before one of us was asleep, one of us had burst out laughing. And it was like we're at a slumber party. We were giggling away.
Paul, if I may, I was just going to throw to the audience just for time for a couple of questions. If anyone has a question. Lady over here. Lady over here.
Yeah, thank you. The retreat of foreign news bureaus across the world is quite common knowledge now. How is that affecting your job as journalists? What's the main point? The rise of Fox News and remote reporting. How's it affecting you getting your stories to us?
I completely object. When I got out and there was this like shockwave went through the journalistic world in London. All the editors had these big meetings, and I was like, okay, yeah, maybe make it a bit more. We were just gonna have to go. That was it. Go, get what you need. I said, okay, a bit of more safety, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we got works. And I think there's been a knee-jerk reaction that is like. It's like, you can't, how do you mix health and safety with that?
I wonder whether I'm blinded by the light, as they say.
Somebody there.
I just wondered whether there was a question at the back, because I always feel I should go to the back to see if there are any hands up. So.
I have a question. You know the Red Crescent ambulance thing that you mentioned?
Yeah.
What is it that, like, why do they actually disappear people? They working for the government?
Why did they what, sorry?
Why did they disappear people? Are they working?
So the question is about the Red Crescent ambulance and are they working for the government? Thank you.
Yeah, the Red Crescent are constitutionally an independent organisation and do a lot of extremely good work, mainly in government-held areas of Syria. But there were many reports early on, which is when this was in the Syrian uprising, where government soldiers and government army soldiers had actually taken people out of Red Crescent ambulances and had never been seen again. I mean, the attack on the health system by the Syrian government was deliberate, and it was a key part of their strategy. They thought if they could target people who were being shot by them and being injured by the army, then it would act as a deterrent. And I mean, doctors and medical workers were a key target, still are actually. I mean, Dr. Mohammed has escaped from Homs. I mean, you saw that he's still there in Syria, still working in field hospitals. So the answer is that they weren't working for the government, but the Red Crescent ambulances had been targeted by the government. And I mean, as the guy says very clearly, it was very clear, do not get in the ambulance. I mean, Paul, all the reports that what we know happened is that particular ambulance driver was killed shortly afterwards. We don't know the actual circumstances, but the widespread belief is that they're not getting them out, basically.
May I take one final question? Yeah. I'll go straight to the end, if I may.
Hi, I have three questions, but let's go to the present. Her family has issued, they found out that she was targeted, and they are making a lawsuit against the Assad regime. That's number one. That was just a month or two ago. And because of Lise Doucette's wonderful two-part series of Syria, that's explaining that it was a war, and then when Putin came in, then it became whatever. But I happen to have a Syrian, and he explained to me that...
Sorry, do you mind terribly? It's just a short question.
They've given over everything. Assad has said, you can take everything you want, just as long as I stay in power. So who can stop this war? Why didn't Obama do anything? There's no powerful leader. Who can stop this massacre?
That's a very good question.
I've adopted a Syrian reporter, so he wants to know.
We have a big problem there, because essentially over the last 7 years the West abandoned everything in Syria. They didn't intervene when they drew red lines. That was Obama. That was abysmal cowardice, basically. Lost any sense of respect there. But the West in general stood by and made a foreign policy out of doing nothing. And actually doing nothing isn't a foreign policy, it's doing nothing. We've abandoned the fate of the Syrians to the Russians, the Iranians, to the Turks. We've all got vested interests in the region, along with the Saudis. It will be split out. They all get their vested interests. We, because of our government and lack of political will at the UN and individual heads of government, have lost any right to call any shots in Syria. Unfortunately, sad as it is, we're going to be standing, wiping blood from our hands in the next 10 years. Well, we should have done something, we didn't.
I run out of time, but I did actually want to ask you one final thing that Paul would like to say before we end. I mean, there's no obligation.
No,
I just wanted to make sure that you said what you wanted to say.
I wrote this book. I wrote the book to tell their story. That was what was given to me. That was the last thing I put in the tunnel, tell the story. I wrote the book. I'm so proud of what these guys have done in making this film, because you know it's doing what I said, it's telling their story, and if every one of you goes away and respects it a little bit, then you're telling their story too. What more can we ask for? Thank you.
Tom for making this film, and all the funders for the film, without which these stories are not told, and also to the audience for watching the film and listening to the Q&A. Let's hope that the conversations can continue after this screening. Thank you very much for coming.